Number 10, Lloyd Forager. Lloyd Forager might not be your traditional superhero, but once I saw that James was adding some anime and manga love to this list, you know I had to at least mention one of my own recent favorites from the world of Japanese comics, aka manga. Lloyd Forager is the main character of Spy Family, although Lloyd Forager is probably not even his real name. Spy Family, for those that don't know, is a manga and an anime. In Spy Family, Lloyd is a spy from the country of Westeros, who has given up his very identity and put his life on the line multiple times in his fight to secure peace. And as a spy, he of course never gets to even be acknowledged by the public. If that doesn't make him a superhero in your eyes, I do not know what should, because personally to me that's enough. Lloyd has proven to be extremely intelligent, skilled in both armed and unarmed combat, an amazing athlete and acrobat based on what I've seen him accomplish, and is a master of disguise, and that's putting it lightly. And of course, he is stealthier even than your own shadow at high noon when it's behind you.
Alright, so my first pick is the Crow. Now, some would argue that he isn't really a superhero, and sure, maybe not in the traditional sense, but he takes out baddies, he wears a getup, he has powers, he's a superhero to me. A very vengeful, violent one, but a superhero all the same. So this indie comic book series by James O'Barr, just oozing with atmosphere. You can feel him just dumping his personal pain into every page. Deeply personal story for him. Anyway, book is fantastic, so is the movie. But let's focus on what powers this undead spirit possesses. There are a number of characters in the series who gain the Crow power. Often the recipient has died, and the Crow brings them back from the dead to enact justice on those who have done them and their loved ones wrong. First of all, they're undead, so they don't need to eat or sleep. They instantly heal from most injuries like gunshots or stab wounds. They have an increased level of strength, hurling lowly scum around like ragdolls. They can also have acute senses and can see through their companion crow's eyes, allowing them to survey areas far beyond what a normal person would be able to in order to help track and hunt their targets. And finally, an individual with the Crow power can absorb the pain of a person's memory and then transfer it to someone else, like an enemy, for example. So lots of cool abilities here.
Number 8, Crystal. Crystal does not often get love on the channel, so I'm excited to be talking about her today. She's an Inhuman, and while many people know her brother-in-law, Black Bolt, not as many are familiar with her. Crystal is the sister of Black Bolt's wife, Queen of the Inhumans, Medusa, which makes Crystal a princess. But despite being an Inhuman princess, for a long time Crystal merely wanted to get away from her life, her expectations, and her family, and see the rest of the world, causing her to become a frequent ally to the Fantastic Four after coming to Earth's surface and meeting them, and of course a major love interest to Johnny Storm's Human Torch. Her powers are pretty wild as they allow her to manipulate the elements. Think of like basically the Avatar, but like if it was a superhero in Marvel Comics. That's kind of what we're dealing with here. Number 7, Kate Pryde. Kate Pryde isn't really a sidekick per se. I mean, with Marvel, there are very few sidekicks, but for a time, you could maybe have considered her one, if you will. She was Wolverine's young pal during a time when he had an almost constant stream of younger, well, for lack of a better term, sidekicks, who he would often team up, help to train, take care of, and at the end of the day were kind of like little sisters often to him. Kate is among these select few, and to be honest, she's in pretty good company. I love how Wolverine is one often shown to be a good mentor to younger mutants, despite the fact that he often would swear himself that he's such a lone wolf. And I also love that too, he's had a hand in helping to shape and train some of the most powerful female mutants around, of which I would consider Kitty Pryde to be one. Kate's powers allow her to phase, and over the years she has become a master in her abilities. While not yet considered to be Omega level, I'm actually surprised that she hasn't made that cut yet. When it comes to phasing, I would say she's probably one of the most gifted mutants around that we have, and I would say that with her phasing abilities, there's not much that she can't do with them. And we talk about her power levels so little in the comics, I'm not even fully sure if she's even considered alpha, though I'd at least consider her to be alpha tier myself. So I hope she is. I don't know, I can't find that information. If you have that information, let me know in the comments. She should at least be alpha tier to me. Number 6, Wally West. Wally West is in fact faster than Barry Allen, and pretty much everyone knows it at this point. And if you don't know it, well, now you do. And if you're refusing it, you might just be in denial, my friends. I'm just going to say it, while there might be some areas where Barry excels more than Wally, for the most part, Wally West being faster makes him generally more powerful than Barry Allen. This is because Barry and Wally both get their powers from speed, so being faster literally translates to more power, as speed is used to fuel many of the things that they can do, their powers. Wally West, however, wasn't always the Flash. Before that, he was Barry's sidekick known as Kid Flash, and even then he showed great promise and potential, which he obviously delivered on when he grew up and himself took up the mantle, following in his uncle's footsteps, and then of course outrunning those footsteps. Number 5. Revolution. Formerly known as Winter Soldier and Captain America, it's Buchanan Bucky Barnes, Steve Rogers' pal and former sidekick during World War II times. I mean, especially if we're talking Marvel Cinematic Universe here, I think we have to acknowledge that Bucky Barnes' Winter Soldier had simply more oomph than Steve. Now granted, in Civil War, Steve is also trying to hold back because he doesn't want to hurt Bucky, but this is still a character who is shown in live action to be able to hold off both Iron Man and Captain America at the same time. In the comics, some would also argue that Bucky Barnes ends up as a better Captain America than even his protege and the original superhero that he sidekicked for, Steven Rogers. So, whichever way you're looking at this one, Bucky at the very least has the potential to be more powerful than Steve all around, and possibly even more influential, I'd say. I personally also think having a metal robot arm kind of gives him an arm up on the competition, if you will. I mean, his one arm is always going to be more powerful than Steve's two together because, you know, it's robotic and insanely powerful. Basically, like, if we're talking arm wrestling competitions, I think Bucky is more powerful for sure with robo arm. Man, I wish I had a robo arm so I could just destroy everyone in arm wrestling competitions. I would totally get a robot arm for that. Number 4, John Kent. There are some who might want to fight me on this one, but at the end of the day, honestly, it's kind of the truth. So we can discuss it if you want. We can fight me. Let's fight. Let's go. John Kent is the son of Superman's Clark Kent and Lois Lane. Like his dad, he is also a superhero and also uses the Superman mantle. And it's also been proven based on tests that Batman has run that John himself has more potential than even his dad does in terms of his power levels. As a straight up hybrid Kryptonian and Terran baby, he also has more agency when it comes to his home of Earth, which means that he's a lot more comfortable sort of getting involved with Earth's issues and helping to combat them head on. Clark, on the other hand, has always kind of struggled with this because although he does live on Earth, he's not technically from the planet, so he tends to like create a little bit of distance, maintain a little bit of boundaries in regards to like what kind of issues he feels comfortable getting involved with, in comparison to John, who really is just kind of like, no, like Earth is my home, like let's do it. And while some may want to argue that John simply will never be able to beat Superman, I've never really understood this logic or this defensiveness surrounding that topic. As John's dad, it's only logical that Clark would actually want his son to be better than he is as time goes on, and to see him succeed and improve upon basically everything Clark himself has learned and done. Isn't that what most parents want for their children? So as fans of characters, isn't that kind of what we should want for their kids? I don't know. I just feel like we should consider what Superman would want for John and then kind of take that into consideration if we're a Superman fan. Number 3, Rogue. In the Fox films, Rogue and Wolverine have more of like a father-daughter relationship, and it's for that reason that I'm including them here. Even though sometimes they still had kind of creepy romantic moments, possibly inspired by their creepy romantic moments from the comics that they sometimes have, where they're less father-daughter and more, I mean, kind of just two people that didn't like each other and then did like each other and then had some sort of weird deep-seated lust for each other that we never really fully explored. But anyways, Rogue and Wolverine for the most part are given a father-daughter, mentor-mentee relationship in the films. Rogue's powers, however, I would say are just way more epic than Wolvie's. He has a healing factor, but it's also a power that Rogue can literally adopt, can literally just take from him if she wants. In fact, Rogue can literally adopt any mutant power just by coming into physical contact with another mutant. In the films, however, she isn't quite at the level she currently is in the comics in terms of her control over this. So the only major downside here is that, you know, she accidentally often hurts those she loves when she uses her powers because she can't really fully control them. So Rogue is actually more wary of even utilizing them in combat, and even at one point basically tries to get rid of her powers altogether because of how cursed her powers make her feel. However, this does not diminish the fact that her abilities, regardless of how wild they are or how much she kind of is wary of using them, are just simply more OP than Wolverine's. And that's saying something too, because Wolverine at times can be extremely OP himself, so no disrespect to Wolverine, just, I mean, Rogue's crazy, you know what I mean? Rogue's on another level to me. Number 2, Tempest. Tempest is insanely OP in comparison to Aquaman, and that's not even me trying to take a swing at Aquaman. While he's been the butt of many jokes in the past, I actually think that Aquaman himself is a vastly underrated character, so I'm not knocking him, I'm just saying the facts. Because of course, that being said, Garth, who is known as Tempest currently in the comics but was previously known as Aqualad, the sidekick of Aquaman, just has more going on than his predecessor. Tempest not only has all the powers that he gets from being an Atlantean, but is also well versed in the world of magic as well. He can cast spells, and in the past has also been shown to be able to control certain elements, teleport, and even turn himself invisible, so yeah. Number 1, Storm. It's weird to think about this one, but at one point Storm was kinda like Gambit's sidekick, which feels so random now in the present day, but I still love it. This was during the time when Storm became temporarily de-aged and basically became like the thief Gambit's apprentice, his little apprentice thief, which is pretty wild to think about. That 1, Storm trained with Gambit, and that 2, the pair actually have kinda like a really close bond because of this. One that rarely gets showcased, let alone mentioned, despite the fact that they had such a fun dynamic on their adventures together back in the day. Once Storm regained her memories while in her de-aged teenager form, she was actually the one to bring Gambit to the X-Men, having finally remembered them. And this was how Gambit would ultimately join up with the team, which is also pretty wild and cool to think about. Storm would eventually return to her normal age, and I would say is hands down way more powerful than Gambit is now. Granted, once again, not to knock Gambit, because you know I love him. But this is also a duo that I would love to see return to action together for another team-up series. Because, yeah, it's just such a fun time. And why can't we have them do that in present day? You know what I mean? Anyways, what I'm saying is you should also go back and you should read the Gambit miniseries that just came out, where we get to follow them while they're teamed up together. It's super cute. I still have to read the final issue, but so far so good. Number 10, Sideways. Sideways hails from DC Comics. He was introduced to be part of a new wave of original characters that DC wanted to make mainstays. Sadly, many of these characters did not end up enduring and kind of were forgotten, but that doesn't mean that they weren't cool, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to remember them, because they were cool. Maybe we should have done more with them. Sideways' powers allowed him to create rifts in midair, ripping holes into space-time that he could use to teleport through. In other words, he had the ability to teleport not just through space, but also through dimensions. Pretty neat. However, he didn't have the best handle on his powers, and therefore had difficulty controlling these rifts in regards to where they would lead to. Not great considering how powerful this ability is, and how easy you can mess up the timeline with it if you weren't careful. However, it's still a pretty insane ability, and that actually wasn't all Derek James as Sideways could do. He can also manipulate gravity, creating mini black holes, and possesses superhuman strength, durability, and reflexes, as well as a healing factor. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we are doing here, and if you want more lists like this, be sure to let us know by clicking that like button. Number 9, Explodey Boy. Explodey Boy was one of the young mutants who fled to Genosha looking for somewhere they could thrive and be safe. However, it didn't work out too well for those mutants when Genosha was targeted by Cassandra Nova's wild sentinels, decimating the island and killing many of its inhabitants in one of the worst mutant tragedies ever. Explodey Boy was one of the mutants who perished in this attack. He has since been returned to life on Krakoa, where he was resurrected, but a zombie version of him also temporarily returned to life during the Empire event, as seen in the X-Men miniseries tie-in. His powers allow him to make things explode, known as phragokinesis, but they were not enough to protect him when the attack on Genosha happened. However, his powers did come in handy when the original, now zombified version of the character chose to sacrifice himself, blowing up to protect the life his resurrected self, now now had on Krakoa, which sounded all in all pretty good to him. Number 8. Trinary. Trinary is one of those mutants who is actually super useful in the right environment and on the right mission, but not every mission is going to be her strong suit. She isn't as well-rounded as others because her powers are really specific. Trinary is a technopath, which is actually, I think, one of my favorite mutations out there. As a technopath, she can communicate with technology and make technology do her bidding. Although more recently in the X-Corp miniseries, which I really wish had become an ongoing series, it was so good, her powers were actually less depicted as blatant control and more depicted as Trinary kind of just asking computers and technology to work with her, and then them acquiescing because they either like her or respect her, or a combination of both. This is interesting to me, especially when you consider mutant kind's current relationship with technology and AI, like Sentinels and Nimrod. Trinary as a technopath is not known for being exceptionally good at fighting or anything like that, and could be considered kinda squishy, unless of course she is going up against anything tech-based or happens to have tech around her which she can use to defend herself, and then she's pretty powerful. So, like I said, not powerful in some ways, powerful in other ways.
Next, I have the Everything Hero, aka Momo, as she's most commonly known as, from My Hero Academia. So Momo, one of the many students in Class 1A who kinda got overlooked as the series went on. She's had a couple moments to shine, but considering how broken her power really is, she could do a lot more. Her power, or quirk, is creation, so this gives her the ability to create inanimate objects from her body, and she can create anything, provided she has enough fat cells to work with, and understands the atomic configuration of whatever she's trying to create. Very intelligent, which definitely helps with that part. Pretty insane ability, right? The level of versatility you could get out of this, I mean, the possibilities almost endless. During a fight, she'll often produce melee weapons to fight at close range. That's kind of the first place your brain goes. But she can also form shields, not only to protect her, but her teammates as well. Bigger objects require more calories, so some stuff she can't produce on a whim, but I mean, man, amazing hero to have on your team. She can act as a supporting role, offensive, defensive, and even outside of battle. Just the sheer convenience of this power. Like, she doesn't need to buy anything other than food. Out of toilet paper, like, here, let me eat this box of Oreos, so I'll make a fresh pack for you. That's the other thing. She could just eat whatever the hell she wants without consequences. Like, wow, amazing power. Anyway, cool character. Kind of see her arc play out already, but I hope we get to see her do one or more things in the future.
Number 6, Deadpool. Deadpool might seem like a joke hero to many out there, but at the end of the day, he's actually extremely terrifying to face. And I'm not just saying like face to face, because under his mask he looks like kind of a nightmare, though he kind of does. Sorry, Wade. But I'm also saying this because Deadpool is undying, which means he can pretty much just keep coming at you. In fact, for a while he was actually cursed so that he literally couldn't die, making his healing factor undefeatable in combat. Deadpool is also pretty intimidating when you consider the kind of life he has had. For Deadpool, he's kind of willing to lay it all on the line because he often feels like he doesn't really have much to live for, so he doesn't need to hold back in a fight most days. Kind of depressing, but very true, which means he's even more unrelenting than most others out there.
Next on the list is Matter Eater Lad. Tenzel Kem, aka Matter Eater, a hero of the 30th century and member of the Legion of Superheroes, will just eat anything you put in front of him. Or rather, he can eat anything you put in front of him, safely, mind you. I guess technically we can all eat stuff that isn't edible. We just get sick or we die. But in Matter Eater Lad's case, everything is fair game. So confining him is a real problem. He can just tunnel his way out of any situation. Great hero to be teamed up with for that reason. It's easy to look at his power and think it's just kind of silly. That's probably why this guy rarely ever shows up. But he did save the entire universe on one occasion when he eats the Miracle Machine, a seemingly indestructible device with the power to turn thought into reality. And it's not just physical matter he's limited to either. He can eat like raw energy itself. Managed to like take a chomp out of Superman. It'd be hard for him to get close enough to do it, but I don't know, wait till he's asleep, probably be able to like bite an eye or two off. He was determined enough, and then like Superman couldn't do his heat vision anymore. I don't know.
Number 4, Booster Gold. Booster Gold is often underestimated by other superheroes in the canon, as well as supervillains, and of course, by fans. But let's not forget that this is a man from the future. Sure, he might not always come across as someone who knows what he's doing, and does he make mistakes? You betcha he does. But he still is someone who has literally time traveled before. And he comes with impressive knowledge of the goings-on of the world, considering that to him, it's all kind of ancient history. Booster Gold does also try really hard to be taken seriously, publicly and to be respected as a hero, and ultimately I think he does deserve more respect from both his colleagues and from fans. He might not always be the best hero, but his heart is ultimately in the right place, and he's proven countless times again and again that when the world is in a dangerous place, he's a hero who can step up to the plate and do what needs to be done, willing to put others' safety way above his own.
Alright, next up at number 3 I have Doreen Green, aka Squirrel Girl. Squirrel Girl, not a superhero name that conjures up a very intimidating image in your head. In fact, it sounds like the type of hero you'd see in The Tick, maybe, rather than Marvel itself. And appearance-wise, yeah, she looks like she belongs at a furry convention. Even within universe, people don't take her very seriously. She wanted to be Iron Man's sidekick, and he was like, no. Then they were kidnapped by Dr. Doom. Doom felt so unthreatened by Doreen that he didn't even bother subduing her, really. To the surprise of Stark and Doom, she ended up saving the day, though, calling on hundreds of squirrels to swarm Doom's ship, overwhelming him, and freeing Iron Man, who really changed his tune on how he thought about Squirrel Girl at that point. So her powers, unsurprisingly, are squirrel-based. We've already established she can communicate and command squirrels, but she also has the abilities of squirrels themselves. She has powerful legs allowing her to leap far distances. She has powerful jaw strength, climb on anything that a squirrel would be able to. She has enhanced reflexes, night vision, and she's exceptionally strong.
Number 2, Dazzler. Dazzler is by far one of my favorite superheroes out there. Clearly, she is someone that I don't think you should underestimate, despite the fact that a lot of folks might try to tell you otherwise. Dazzler's claim to fame is that she can turn sound into light. Overall, it doesn't sound that impressive, right? You're not wrong. But at the same time, Daz has used her abilities to keep down powerhouses like the Hulk and Enchantress. The amount of sound she can channel too seems almost unlimited, with her using her powers against other known sonic powerhouses such as Black Bolt, and even using her powers to permanently defeat her foe, like when she accidentally killed the villain Ulysses Claw. He wasn't even necessarily her villain in her own series, he just kind of decided to strike out at her, and it went extremely poorly for him.
My last pick for today is the Punisher. So, Frank Castle doesn't have any superpowers. He's just a regular guy with a military background, a vendetta, and a gun collection. But his determination, his passion, his thirst for vengeance, this single-minded focus makes him absolutely relentless. He's most well known for taking out street-level thugs. That's what pretty much every movie iteration has done with the character, and that's probably where he works best. But he has managed to go toe-to-toe with some pretty big names. We're talking Spider-Man, where he made his debut, Daredevil, even the Hulk. He doesn't win every fight, but he holds his own. He's got a tactical mind, and he's willing to do whatever it takes. He's got an arsenal of weapons, and he knows how to use them. More importantly, he does use them. Punisher is the type of advantage that villains have. He's willing to cross the line that other heroes won't. In fact, it's kind of what he prefers. It's his thing. He doesn't pull punches or hesitate to use lethal force. He's neither fully hero nor villain, right?
Number 10, Scout. Formerly known by her previous codename Honey Badger, which is still sometimes fondly used by fans in reference to her character, just like Lara before her, Gabby Kinney also seems to be another character based in the Wolverine family who has the potential to be even more of a powerhouse than anyone who has come before her. Why? Because Gabby has something they don't have. She can't feel pain. For Wolverine, this has always been an interesting point. Sure, he can heal if he's hurt, has his limbs ripped off even, but at the end of the day, he has to feel every single wound he gets. The pain doesn't necessarily get easier with time. Wolverine always feels every second of it. In fact, this is also why some have theorized that Wolverine sometimes has memory problems as a result of mental and physical pain, which has in essence basically scarred his brain, causing him to have issues with remembering his past and memory recall in general. I mean, he's also had his mind literally scrambled a few times, but I'm sure the pain he's suffered also does have a role to play when it comes to his memory problems as well. Gabby, however, can't feel pain, which in ways makes her stronger. It means she can push herself even more, and that she likely won't have any brain trauma as a result of at least physical pain suffered, because, she can't actually feel that, as opposed to X-23, now Wolverine, and Wolverine himself, Logan, who both can. But she does need to be careful about how she uses this power, as it also means Gabby could push herself too far and overdo it, putting herself physically in danger and leaving her on the brink of death, or just straight up dead, as a result. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, we have more content for you. You can check out our most powerful playlist for more super powerful characters, if you're into that. Number 9, Jimmy Ultra Olsen. Jimmy Olsen! Oh my goodness, I could not do this list and not include everyone's favorite Superman sidekick, Jimmy, Superman's pal, as he's also fondly been known. In fact, there have been a few adventures where Jimmy has even seemingly rivaled his pal Superman in terms of his own power levels. Case in point, there was a time when Jimmy Olsen inherited half of a medallion from his father. Having found the other half with Superman, Jimmy found that when the pieces were combined, they basically made him super powerful, even more powerful than Superman. And this was made evident in the issue of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, issue 129, when due to a misunderstanding and some blackmail, the two of them are forced to fight each other. But as always, everything worked out in the end. This medallion is sadly no longer around in the comics, it had to be destroyed, but the stories involving it still stand as a testament to one of the times that Jimmy was more powerful than Supes himself. Number 8, War Machine. While Tony Stark might be one of the smartest men in the Marvel Universe, that doesn't mean that he can master every element of what it takes to be a hero. On the contrary, there are a lot of areas where Iron Man could actually probably use some improvement, to be honest. After all, Tony spent most of his life growing up in the lap of luxury, and while he still always had his own trials and tribulations as a person, he didn't necessarily have the same life experiences as, say, someone like James Rhodes. War Machine is, in fact, simply better at fighting and tactics in the field, I would say, than Tony is, due to his extensive military training and his career. You also need to add in the fact that Iron Man wasn't necessarily a pilot, at least I don't believe he was in the beginning in the comics, unless I'm missing something, when he started piloting his own Iron Man suit. Whereas Rhodey started already having like a bunch of experience and training in that area, so he actually started off with a pretty good understanding of how to best utilize his suit and fly it around. He also tends to wear armor more that's application is more focused specifically on fighting. So in a way, he is more powerful than Tony if we're talking fighting prowess, I'd say. Number 7, Curse. Curse is actually one of my favorite New Mutants in the comics. I love Curse. Curse is a mutant whose power forces her to curse her enemies, and if she doesn't have any enemies on hand, forces her to curse those around her. She can't keep the curses in, otherwise they basically do damage to her, and while she can control the type of curses that she grants to others or that she casts on others, performing nicer curses also seems to have a physical cost for her. So typically she has to make them kinda nasty in the interests of self-preservation. But also, Curse seems to generally enjoy making other people miserable and causing them harm to an extent, especially if it's people that she doesn't like or just simply doesn't care for. This is what makes her such an interesting and fascinating character to me, but makes her a dangerous character for most heroes to work with. The other thing I love about Curse is that she isn't really a hero, nor is she a villain. I wouldn't say she directly aligns with either side, although I could see her leaning, I guess, a little bit more towards villain if she wanted to. Currently, Curse is lending her talents for better, and I guess for worse, to the X-Men Green Team, which is a small mutant team focused on fighting aggressively to save the environment, led by Nature Girl, who recently underwent a secondary mutation after deciding that she'd basically had enough and decided to let her anger motivate her activism. Number 6, Vanisher. Vanisher is an old school mutant villain who made his first appearance all the way back in the second ever issue of X-Men. Yeah, pretty old character. Well, his power set is actually pretty wild, allowing him to seemingly teleport almost anywhere instantly, with its limitations for bringing others and the distance not yet clearly defined. He also was pretty easily defeated by the X-Men, or more specifically, their mentor, Professor X, the first time around. While admittedly, the young X-Men did struggle against the Vanisher during their first encounter, Professor X easily capacitated and defeated Vanisher by just wiping his memory. A pretty dark way to deal with a tough villain. But I do love how weirdly easy it was for Vanisher to be defeated. Vanisher has since made some appearances in the comics, but now in modern day his powers are even less impressive considering the caliber of teleporter heroes we're now familiar with. Vanisher doesn't really stand a chance against them, despite the fact that his power set is still pretty useful because, I mean, teleporting. Still, I feel like Vanisher versus Magic, I'm gonna put my money on Magic in that one. Number 5, Trinary. Trinary is another favorite of mine, and yet I can understand how some might not see her as the most useful or powerful mutant that we have, given her power set. She is able to communicate with technology and often get technology to work with her and do whatever it is that she needs. Seemingly, this actually isn't because Trinary can bend tech to her will, more that she's just able to communicate with tech and obviously knows exactly what to say to build an alliance, a connection to the technology, thereby encouraging the tech that she speaks with to actually help her with whatever she needs, of, their own volition. She might not be great in a fist fight, but if that fist fight happens to be against a computer, or if there might be a computer nearby who could be compelled to help Trinary in a fight, she's pretty useful in that regard, so yeah. And I imagine she'd be a star in a show like BattleBots, or she'd simply, just rally the bots and then free them from their human masters, create all kinds of chaos. I could see that being a thing too. Trinary's like, these tech do not want to fight for you, so they're free now. Number 4, Egg. Egg is the epitome of a mutant who is useless, but who actually winds up being also extremely useful. Egg is Fabio Medina. He used to be known by the mutant name of Goldballs, but ended up changing it after he realized that the balls that he was actually able to expel from his body as projectiles were actually infertile eggs. He ended up joining the Five on Krakoa, who are in charge of bringing back any mutants lost by following through with resurrection protocols. While not particularly useful in a fight, as proven by the fact that Egg has been killed multiple times over in the comics just recently, probably suffering the most deaths among the members of the Five, Egg is still a crucial member of this team. Without the eggs that he produces, resurrection would not be possible, hence why he is considered extremely useful. Just maybe not, super useful in a combat scenario. But if you need to be resurrected, Egg is definitely one of the 5 mutants that you should call. Number 3, Cypher. Cypher is of course a mutant who has often been put down as useless, but this was before his mutant glow up. In the last few years in the comics, we've seen a major upgrade to Cypher's power set. Initially, he was just, really good at communicating in the sense of being able to understand all languages, which, is useful, but definitely not anything special when it comes to some of the grand foes that the X-Men are pitted against. If you can just understand different languages, that's like basically having a translator on hand, so yeah. Over the years though, the meaning of his powers and the interpretation of them has changed and evolved. Eventually, Cypher also learned how to communicate with technology, and even learned how to communicate non-verbally, with fighting also being interpreted as a language that he could master. Although he hasn't recently been as present in the comics prior to Jonathan Hickman leaving his position as head of X, Cypher was probably one of the most important and influential mutants in the comics before that happened, and I would say he still kinda is. Without being in the spotlight as much, Cypher is still super important in terms of the lore and the world building that relates to Krakoa, as he is the only one that can easily communicate with and fully comprehend the sentient mutant island of Krakoa. Just can't really have Krakoa without Cypher. Forge. Forge is kinda a squishy guy, which is why he makes our cut, and not particularly well known for his skills, in a fist fight. But he is well known for making cool stuff, especially cool weapons, and because of that, he is actually extremely useful. Many also forget that Forge has experience with shamanism, and not only has a mutant origin, but an origin that is also attached to the world of magic and mysticism, which honestly is pretty cool. However, for those who want to argue that Forge could march in there alongside Cyclops, I think that I would say Forge actually prefers to outfit other heroes than do that himself. Although he could do so, I guess, if he wanted, Forge is generally best on the sidelines, and I think he knows this, helping his fellow teammates and allies to strategize their way to victory, and helping to outfit his fellow mutants to make sure they survive the battle and are left standing afterwards, no matter how tough, or likewise, how squishy they might be normally. Number 1, Dazzler. Of course we're doing a useless list, and even useless but useful, so obviously Dazzler's gonna take my number 1 spot, because she's my number 1 gal. Dazzler is taking our number 1 spot, not because of how useless she seems, but because of how truly useful her powers are, despite the fact that everyone else wants to call her useless. The only thing that really makes her seemingly useless is the fact that Alison Blair actually really prefers to use her powers for her performances, as opposed to being, the team leader of the X-Men, which honestly she easily could be. responsibility. She's been an X-leader of sorts before, but not for the main X-Men team. At least, not as far as I know. Dazzler has powers that have been described before to be potentially unlimited in terms of just how much damage she could do. She can transmute sound into light, and while her light shows in her concerts might seem kinda tame if you're like, yeah, but how you gonna fight with that? She's also used her power set to defeat and defend against heavy hitters like Enchantress and the Hulk. And there's a lot of cool things she can do with that light, okay? Which I would also say means that she is honestly way more useful than people usually give her credit for. Still though, Dazzler prefers to be on the sidelines when it comes to heroics and leave that to the professional 9-to-5 superheroes. But just remember that in a pinch, she could step in and prove herself to be even more powerful than some of the most famous mutant heroes around. Move over, Wolverine. Move over, Cyclops. It's Dazzler time. Number 10. Supreme. Supreme is a character inspired by DC's Superman. Created by Rob Liefeld, the character was originally a part of Image Comics' roster of supers. The great thing about Supreme was that despite being a Superman-esque figure, his series was always somewhat more self-aware, poking fun at some of the typical historical superhero tropes. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us you love us by clicking that subscribe button. Seriously, it really does help us out, and also that way you don't miss out on any awesome content that we have. Wah 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 wah! Number 9. Tech Jacket. Tech Jacket is a member of the Guardians of the Globe. He appears in the Invincible series later on from issue 71 through to 78, but actually first appeared in his own spin-off series based in that universe, self-titled Tech Jacket. Tech Jacket is Zach Thompson, a hero who received an alien tech jacket from a dying alien who had crash-landed on Earth. That alien's name was Kelda, and they belonged to a physically fragile and weaker race of aliens known as the Geldarians. To compensate, they created the Tech Jacket for every member of the race to wear. The Tech Jacket is a permanent item of clothing that is generally never removed. It grants Zach enhanced speed, strength, stamina, and agility. It can create energy blasts and weapons for the user to wield. It can also create force fields and can clean and provide sustenance to its user as needed. Sounds great. You never need to take it off, I feel like. Number 8. Inferno Girl Red. Inferno Girl Red comes to us from the Massiverse, which is the universe that Radiant Black exists in. Inferno Girl Red, however, is a character that exists in her own series. She is kind of like a magical girl meets like a Power Ranger in terms of her look and her abilities. She comes with a mystical dragon bracelet, which gives her powers, a cool suit, and allows her to transform. She's a pretty new hero and still figuring out her power set, but I know as time goes on she'll only get stronger. We got our first glimpse of her in the first Massiverse crossover comic, and it was there that I became obsessed with wanting to read more about her. If you also feel the pull, she has her own miniseries, which is now collected in its own trade that you can check out. And I don't think it's going to be the last series that she'll have either. I think it's going to be continued, and I would also highly recommend checking it out. Her story is captivating and her character design is one of the best out there. Number 7. Stone Boy. Stone Boy is from DC Comics, first appearing in Adventure Comics in issue number 306 back in 1963. His power set is extremely useful as it renders him extremely strong and durable, but unfortunately, he's also kinda useless because while extremely strong and durable in his stone form, he's also immobile. Or at least for a very long time, was only ever really immobile. This is because while in his stone form, he was technically asleep. That's right. His alien race possesses this stone form because on their planet, the nights are actually half a year long. Their stone form is therefore used as a kind of suspended animation or stasis throughout these very, very long nights. However, Stone Boy would later find a way to be awake while in his stone form, which allowed him to become mobile in the future. Still though, what a weird but interesting power and origin. Number 6. Anarchist. Anarchist is an interesting one. He has powers that allow him to produce acid sweat. He was a part of the team originally known as X-Force before being renamed to X-Statix. This is the mutant reality TV team who films all their exploits and interactions for the purpose of basically entertainment. Now the reason I decided to go with Anarchist as opposed to Zeitgeist is because I feel like Anarchist's powers are more useful as it's easier to make yourself sweat as opposed to, you know, make yourself throw up. However, in either case you'd probably want to be well hydrated dehydrated when using either of these abilities. Anarchist can build up sweat and use it to generate energy, which he disperses in acidic blasts. Anarchist recently was resurrected on Krakoa after dying a while ago in a final fight with his fellow Ecstatics teammates. Number 5. Starboy. Starboy was originally known to be quite powerful back in the pre-Zero Hour days, at least. An alien, he seemed to gain powers from being caught in a comet's tail. They allowed him to manipulate the density of objects and people by drawing on power from stars and using their pull to alter the gravitational pull of others. For a time, he also had additional powers that made him as powerful as Superman, possessing superhuman durability, strength, flight, and even his own electric vision. However, over time, these faded, and Tom Kalor would grow up to become the future Starman. As Starman, it was revealed that Tom suffered from schizophrenia, and that when he wasn't acting as a hero, he was actually living in a sanitarium and had to take medication for his condition to keep it under control. His powers are useful, but he used to be much more powerful when his power set was more akin to Superman. So, number 4. Karma. Karma probably is one of the most useful powers of all of these people on the list, and that's why she's so high up, but otherwise, you know, she's pretty squishy. Such is the case with a lot of the more psychic or psionically inclined superheroes. In fact, I was watching some Star Trek lately, TNG, aka The Next Generation, and I was just thinking a similar thing about Donna Troy, who also struggles from being, you know, sometimes super useful and sometimes not so useful depending on the scenario. I guess that's kind of a different issue, but she's also kind of squishy. You know how Donna Troy can be. She's like, I sense a presence and I know exactly what these people are thinking or feeling. Or she'll be like, I don't sense anything. It's great. Karma is a telepath, but not a super powerful one. She can read minds, thoughts, and feelings, but only to a certain level or degree. However, she also has the power to control minds, and in this telepathic ability, she generally tends to excel. So while she is squishy and not particularly gifted at reading minds, she can just take control over her enemies. There have been shown to be some restrictions on this power though. A younger Karma would struggle sometimes to maintain control for an extended period, although at other times Karma has also been shown to be able to take control of multiple minds at once. Although I do believe she can only pilot one person at a time, at least that used to be a thing, even while in possession of multiple minds, which is kind of also a drawback. Number 3. Fury. Although really we aren't quite talking about Fury, at least not one of the other versions of this character, but instead focusing on the version of her that is mainly known as Lita Hall. This version of the character seems to have moved past her origin as Wonder Woman's daughter following the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, where everything kind of got weirdly reset and restructured. Instead, we know her as the daughter of Helena Cosmatos, also Fury, who was raised instead by Admiral Derek Trevor and Miss America, aka Joan Dale Trevor. She ends up becoming the partner of Hector Hall, and the two are going to have a child together when Hector tragically dies. While dead in the real world, Hector's consciousness becomes suspended in a pocket of the dream world, with Brute and Glob turning him basically into their new Sandman after Dream's imprisonment, which all happens in the Sandman series. Lita is visited by Hector in her dreams and eventually chooses to stay with him there, but their child ends up being claimed by the Dream Lord upon his return. He forces Hector's spirit to move on and then explains that one day he will actually come for Lita's child, who actually belongs to the Dreaming. Despite her Amazonian-like abilities, Lita can be seen as kind of useless, as she doesn't really act as a hero in Neil Gaiman's Sandman series, and instead attempts to pursue a normal life with her son. That is until her son goes missing, and then she kind of just becomes unhinged. And she also, even before that, kind of is compromised somewhat in the sense that she gets insane anxiety when it comes to being separated from her son at any moment because, of course, of Dream's threat to one day come and claim him. Number 2. Destiny. Is Destiny a hero? Well, I mean, lately, I'd say, in a weird way, she kinda is. She is one of the few people who was able to stop Moira McTaggart from killing off a mutant kind, destroying them from the inside out. She's also been one of the few who was able to stand against Mr. Sinister in his many attempts to take control. However, ultimately, Destiny isn't winning that fight because we know the Sins of Sinister event is fast approaching. And Destiny is on the Quiet Council currently, which exists to try and govern Krakoa, making life for mutants on the island nation a paradise, and defending that life that the nation is built for its residents. So I'm gonna say that right now, you know, she's close enough to a superhero. I think we can count her on this list. I think we can just acknowledge that Destiny's been doing some pretty good things lately. When it comes to her power set, Destiny is kind of useless if we're talking about, you know, like a fist fight to the death. But she's extremely useful when it comes to her powers, if kept out of the action. More of a guiding light for those fighting that is, better kept on the sidelines. Destiny is a precog and can use her mutant abilities to see the future. The more probable a future is, the clearer her vision of it will become, allowing her to sense which futures and outcomes are most likely. Number 1. Booster Gold. Booster Gold is kind of the epitome of what this list is about to me. His powers aren't really powers that he was born with or incurred from, a wacky lab accident gone wrong, but instead were gained through him stealing some tech in the future, which is where he's from, and using it to travel to the past. Their booster used his tech as well as his knowledge from the future to try and become a hero, and well, he succeeded. Hooray! However, Booster isn't always the best at heroics. Case in point, the time he tried to give a gift to Batman and Catwoman in honor of their wedding. His gift was to travel back in time and prevent Bruce's parents from dying, but in doing so, this actually prevented Bruce and Selina from ever getting together, and it also caused a lot of other problems. So yeah, he's got some really amazing powers, but sometimes he isn't so great at using them super wisely. But that's part of the charm of Booster Gold as well. Number 10. Destiny. Truly one of the most useless, I would say at least, in a fight, Destiny is still an extremely powerful mutant. While she might not be able to kick your butt physically, she could easily destroy most of her opponents simply with the knowledge she has of the future, and using it to hurt those who stand in her way and advance her own plots. Destiny is also one of those people who is a masterful and skilled manipulator of scenarios, often choosing to keep secrets in order to make sure her plans go to plan. When Mr. Sinister attempted to eliminate the Quiet Council, or most of them anyways, Destiny proved to be one of his greatest challenges in accomplishing this feat. As soon as Mr. Sinister focused on a direct plan of attack, it actually caused Destiny's powers to trigger, allowing her to sense the future of what he was planning, thereby preventing it from coming to pass by informing others on how to best avert that disaster. When you have a precog like Destiny, she can prove very challenging to get around, especially when she's someone like Mystique protecting and guarding her too, and especially if you happen to try to target her. I think the best course of action if you're going after Destiny is try not to target her. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you also love mutants as much as I do, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Dr. Reyes. Dr. Cecilia Reyes is also a mutant, hence why she is one of the lead doctors on the mutant island nation of Krakoa. Although you might forget the fact that she's a mutant when it comes to the Good Doctor, because our focus is usually on her as a medical professional, as opposed to her as, a mutant superhero. When it comes to being a mutant, her powers allow her to summon a bioshield of sorts, a very tight-knit biofield forms around her, and generally also instinctively appears at a whim whenever Cecilia becomes the target of an attack. However, this isn't the power that comes in most handy with Reyes, whose real usefulness does come from her skill as a gifted doctor and surgeon, who is also more familiar with mutant genetics than most doctors would be. Although at one point I do believe Jean Grey actually declared herself an impromptu surgeon as well, speaking of mutants that can be medical people. But Dr. Reyes, I'm pretty sure, is still one of the few mutants who actually has, significant medical training and experience. Unlike Jean just walking in and being like, I'm a surgeon now. It's like, okay, Jean. You got enough going on. Number 8. Shark Girl. Shark Girl isn't particularly useless in my mind, but she also has some setbacks when it comes to her abilities, in the sense that she isn't always in control of them. And I think that we should acknowledge that, so that's why she's here. Shark Girl's mutant powers allow her to turn into a shark, and she doesn't suffer from being on land while in her shark form. She's kind of like, a shark. She's like a shark, a humanoid shark, being able to breathe both on land and underwater, but she is susceptible to the temptation of blood. Ayara can go into a bloodlust, and as a result of this, she'll actually lose control over herself and basically enter into a bloodthirsty rage. However, that being said, I still feel like she is underappreciated when it comes to what she is capable of. Not only can she seamlessly transition from shore to sea, being just as at home in the depths of the ocean as she is on the land, but Ayara as Shark Girl also gains super strength and super speed, so yeah. Number 7. Sandman. I mean, I love Wesley Dodds, and This might be a hot take, but while I would say Dodds did quite a bit of good as the Sandman of the 1940s, as we later learn, kind of filling in for Dream, although this was likely unbeknownst to many who were called upon by the universe to do so during Dream's imprisonment, as Sandman, Dodds would use his intellect to craft equipment and create chemicals to use in combat that would render his enemies unconscious. Hence his name, because like the mythical Sandman, Dodds the Sandman would also, put you to sleep. However, without the power of his prophetic dreams, Dodds also wouldn't really be a superhero at all. It was this power that gave him purpose and motivated him to become the Sandman. So I would say it was so useful that it actually took a rather ordinary fellow and made him into something more extraordinary. Of course, that being said, Wesley Dodds, I believe, also served in the military, so he was a hero in that way, but he wasn't a superhero until he became Sandman. Number 6, Color Kid. Color Kid isn't usually someone you think of when you think of, useful powers, and yet Color Kid actually worked really hard to master his powers. While there are actually tons that he has accomplished, many still think of him as useless in modern comics. Admittedly, the reboot of the continuity didn't really help him out here. However, pre-Crisis and pre-Zero Hour, his powers were more useful than you might think. In the 1966 Adventure Comics issue 351, he showcases just what he can accomplish by changing the color of a kryptonite cloud that is threatening Superboy and Supergirl, preventing them from flying. The cloud is made of green K, but Color Kid, using his powers, is able to change it to blue K, which must also affect it on a molecular level, as it no longer therefore has any effect on Superboy or Supergirl. The implication here also implies that Color Kid could in the future use his powers to help many Kryptonian heroes when they are faced with kryptonite problems, or likewise to help out Green Lanterns back when they had their weakness to all things yellow. So he could be actually really useful. Number 5, Jubilee. When most people think of Jubilee, they think of the 90s X-Men animated series, I imagine. Here, Jubilation Lee was introduced to us as a bratty young mall rat teen who had run away from home and whom the X-Men came across and then decided to take in. One of the first times we see her use her powers, she accidentally destroys an arcade game in the show. But in reality, Jubilee in the animated series really only runs away from home because her foster parents sick a sentinel on her, causing Jubilee to run away for her own safety. And while she does totally destroy that arcade game, she is also young and her powers have just manifested, and she's probably feeling, a bit stressed because she has no home and she has to live in a mall. Jubilee's powers in the comics would develop to a point that they were considered to be not just useful, but even some of the most powerful abilities that we've possibly seen, with Emma Frost once stating that Jubilee had the potential to cause explosions at a subatomic level. In other words, Jubilee's powers could make her as useful or as destructive as multiple nuclear power sources or weapons. That's crazy. Number 4, Starman. For this point, we are talking about Ted Knight's Starman. I would argue that Ted Knight is kinda useless in the sense that he doesn't really have superpowers per se, but what he is good at doing is inventing stuff. He's a scientist, and he's a really good scientist, which makes him a powerful ally to other heroes. He also has used this equipment himself to be a hero, hence the name Starman, but really I would say his genius intellect is simply more valuable than his own superheroic nature. Not knocking Ted and his accomplishments, and I wouldn't call him useless per se, although that is the name of the list, but he doesn't have any natural superpowers, and I think he's been more useful in recent years acting as a mentor for younger heroes, namely Star-Spangled Kid, Stargirl, and of course his own son Jack, also known as Starman, who all ended up using his inventions as tools to give them powers. Stargirl herself is known for her use of both Ted's Cosmic Converter Belt and Cosmic Staff. Also, Ted Knight is no longer Starman in the Prime continuity, which could also act as a point against him. Although to be fair to Ted, I think I personally prefer him as Starman to Will Payton's Starman, but yes. Also, Ted got old, so that's kind of part of how life goes. He retired. Number 3, Cypher. Cypher I'd like to rank a little bit higher up on this list because calling him useless feels kind of ridiculous in modern times. By the way, the parameters for my ranking here is I kind of tried to rank the people that, people see as useless but who are actually secretly really OP as higher, so I hope that makes sense. I also feel like people calling Cypher useless is kind of mean. It's hard for me to genuinely call really anyone useless, to be honest, whether they be fictional or real world. Okay, Honestly, some real world people are kinda useless, but in a fictional world, I can imagine, at least, that no one really is. I can imagine that, so just let me have it. However, Cypher is still one of those characters that people attribute as being useless, and so for that reason, we're gonna count him on this list. But of course, his powers actually happen to be some of the most useful, especially when we consider that they also apply to Cypher being able to communicate with technology and using his ability to understand and communicate in all languages to become skilled in the language of fighting, which, yeah, that's a language apparently. A physical language, get it? Except that he was once again proven to be somewhat useless during the Otherworld tournament when Magic trained him because, well, he wasn't very good at fighting there for some reason, which kinda contradicts the other stuff that I know, but hey. Number 2, Dazzler. Dazzler is another one of my all-time favorite superheroes. And of course she's on a useless superhero list. I like to put my favorites on lists like this because it makes me feel better about calling them useless because I know they're my favorites, so I feel like I can kinda do that. Well, she might seem useless to some with her power over light, which she usually prefers to use from a performance standpoint to create dazzling light effects for her concerts and stage performances. Her powers are actually insane. Although I'm still kinda confused about her powers because she can turn sound into light, which does that mean that her concerts, is there sound playing? Can you still hear it? I still have questions about that. I don't know if that's been answered. If it has been answered and I missed it somewhere, please let me know in the comments. It's more that Dazzler isn't as often drawn to heroics that makes her a sometimes useless superhero. Though I will say, although she has in general preferred to try and resist the call of heroism whenever she is thrown into a mission or a scrap, she actually performs pretty admirably. And as we've learned, Alison Blair's powers are also impressive, with her power limits even being still somewhat questioned and defined in the comics in modern day, in terms of just how great they are. She's got a lot of potential. Never forget that even Galactus acknowledged how powerful Daz could be when he made her one of his heralds for a short time. In fact, he probably wouldn't have actually even released her if Daz herself hadn't requested to be free of the obligation. She was kind of the one that was like, look, like, this is cool and all, but I gotta go be a singer, so send me back, man. Number 1, Squirrel Girl. Squirrel Girl is one of my all-time favorite superheroes characters. I love Doreen, you know this, but I cannot ignore the fact that on paper, when I write it all down, her powers, her mutation, well, it does all sound pretty ridiculous. And she should, by all intents and purposes, not be as OP as we know her to be. However, that being said, I feel like we need to acknowledge the fact that her powers, or more likely her people skills, are insanely useful and insanely powerful. Squirrel Girl has the ability to befriend pretty much anyone, no matter their alignment, and is really, and I mean really, good at helping convince criminals to call it quits, either for the day or for the rest of their life, reforming them in some cases permanently, or as permanently as one can in comics, with just a quick pep talk. This means that often when Squirrel Girl is involved, she doesn't even have to fight villains to stop them. And even in the cases where she has had to fight, she has fared, in most cases, surprisingly well. So while she might seem useless, is she really? I feel like if I was picking the name for this list in terms of its title, that's really what I would call it. I would call it superheroes who seem useless but are really super powerful. So that's the true title of the list to me, in my interpretation, in my heart. Number 10, Blur. Starting it off light and breezy, coming in at our number 10 spot is Blur, Stanley Stewart, who is an alternate of an alternate character. Blur appeared in Marvel's Heroes Reborn event and comic from 2021. Blur is fast enough to walk on water, run on air, and can travel at supersonic speeds, though he typically prefers to travel around a couple hundred miles an hour, not having too much reason usually to travel faster. Blur is an alternate version of Stanley Stewart's Whizzer from Earth 712, and Stanley Stewart is an alternate of Robert Frank's Whizzer from the main continuity of Earth 616 and from way back near the beginning of Marvel Comics history. Whizzer is, well, he's kind of Marvel's ripoff of The Flash, and his powers and outfit definitely reflect this. However, not saying that to knock him, because I mean, The Flash and Super Speed are just both great, so it makes sense that Marvel, or Timely as they were known then, would want to create their own version of such a fantastic character with such a fantastic power set. I love Super Speed, and personally I don't think we have enough heroes over at Marvel whose abilities are based on that power set. Number 9, Red Death. I mean, it was really hard for me to rank Red Death on here because while he is a villain and he does ultimately get defeated, he also is pretty insanely powerful when it comes to a few of his other abilities. One of the most wild abilities Red Death from Earth -52 in the Dark Multiverse has, while Bruce is in the driver's seat, is that he can create bat-like Speed Force energy constructs, which he can use to attack his enemies with. Coming into contact with these constructs causes you to age rapidly, making you wither away as though you had lived 1,000 years in an instant, but I guess without getting any wiser, which is really quite a downside. Basically, what I have learned from the Dark Multiverse is that if Bruce Wayne becomes anyone else other than Batman, he's terrifying. And honestly, even when Bruce is Batman, he's terrifying. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you want to hear more about us talking about all the speedsters, check out our Flash playlist because, you know, we got a lot of fast people on there because it's the Flash. Number 8. Quicksilver. Quicksilver is definitely one of the fastest people around in the Marvel Universe. Sure, he might not be as fast as the Flash, although even that is debatable considering he's from a completely different publisher, so, you know, it's not like we're getting daily matchups where the two are pitted against one another, but, you know, he's still pretty impressive. He managed to return after being trapped and isolated outside of reality in his own series, Quicksilver No Surrender. Pietro proved fast enough to defeat Mr. X, a character with precognition abilities so clear and quick that they could anticipate and respond to any hero's actions, rendering those who attempted to take him on pretty much useless. Well, almost any hero, that is. Quicksilver does not have precog abilities, but he didn't need them to handily defeat Mr. X because Pietro's reaction times were just simply that much faster, forcing Mr. X to simply see what he needed to do in order to defeat Quicksilver, but leaving him basically unable to act fast enough to prevent Quicksilver from absolutely whomping him. Pretty devastating stuff. Number 7. Bulletproof. Zandale Randolph, also known as Bulletproof, is a character in the Invincible comics series. He first appeared in issue number 14 as a member of the Guardians of the Globe, and later becomes known as Invincible. Zandale joins Mark and Eve's business venture, Invincible Inc., and fills in for Mark as Invincible when he's unavailable. Zandale gains his superpowers after his twin brother Tyrone experiments on him. As Bulletproof, he has superhuman strength and vulnerability and the ability to fly, as well as energy absorption powers. Just because he's not the original Invincible and is not a Viltrumite doesn't mean that he should be underestimated in the comics, or I'm sure in the animated series whenever he shows up there. Number 6. Witchblade. The series Witchblade hails from Top Cow Production, which is an imprint of Image Comics. The series centers around a mystical artifact and the woman who is granted it after it abandons its current host, in order to save her and heal her. This object is known as the Witchblade, the name of which the character in series also share, and this woman, often the main host most people know when it comes to the Witchblade, is Sarah Pizzini, a NYPD homicide detective. The powers granted to her by the Gauntlet are the ability to form weapons and armor using it. Usually very provocative armor, but this is also because using the Witchblade is not easy and Sarah is not as skilled, especially not at the start of her time as Witchblade. The Witchblade also grants Sarah enhanced strength, flight, allows her to shoot energy blasts, and grants her a healing factor. Witchblade was created by Mark Silvestri, David Wohl, Brian Haberlin, and Michael Turner. Number 5. Tara. Tara is the daughter of Adam Eve and Invincible. She was born on Earth but would move to Taliscria with her parents. Because she is part Viltrumite, it was believed that she would likely grow up to be even stronger than her father who came before her, as this is usually the way with Viltrumites. They get stronger and stronger through each generation. This means that Tara has the potential to become stronger than both her father, grandfather, and of course anyone that they themselves have seemed capable of beating in battle. She's shown to have the natural superpowers and abilities of your average Viltrumite, but just because we've only seen her beginnings in the Invincible series doesn't mean that you should underestimate Tara. Tara has the potential to be one of the strongest Viltrumites we've ever seen in the pages of Invincible, or the comic to have continued on. Number 4. Radiant Black. While Radiant Black might still be a relatively new superhero character to arrive on the scene at Image Comics, I would still argue it's one of the most fantastic new superhero characters we've had in years, at Image or elsewhere. That's what I'm saying. I know it might be a hot take for people, but this comic is really good. This is why you don't want to underestimate this hero or the staying power of the Massiverse, which he hails from. Radiant Black, both the character and the series, involves a story that, like Invincible, plays with our expectations of what to expect from a hero tale. It has no problem subverting and shattering tropes and works to redefine the genre in an extremely refreshing way. Radiant Black as a character is also still new to superheroes, whether we're talking about Nathan Burnett or martial ward, but what he lacks in experience, he more than makes up for in heart and drive, which often propels him towards victory. That and knowing when to rely on those around him and lean on them for support. Number 3. Robot. Robot might seem like an odd pick for this list for reasons I can't really discuss without getting into spoilers for those of you that are watching the Invincible animated series who have yet to read all of the comics. I know the comics are older now, but I still don't want to spoil anything for folks who are like new to this fandom or who simply, don't read comics. You are still welcome here, friends. That is fine. Robot, as we learn in the animated series and the comics, is piloted by Rudy Connors, whose physical body failed him and was too malformed to function properly. So he built himself a robot body. Following that, he also looks to cloning so that he might have a more functional human form, transferring the consciousness of his original body to the new clone body. There are many reasons you don't want to underestimate Robot or Rudy, but mostly because of his intellect. Number 2. The Darkness. The Darkness is an ancient elemental force that takes up residence in a host, granting them special powers. One of the most famous hosts that we have come to know as the Darkness is Jackie Estacado. The powers that Jackie wields are similar to what you'd expect from some kind of demonic force. They're also honestly comparable to Venom's power set from Marvel Comics, at least I find. The Darkness gives you access to a sort of mystical armor which can be summoned at will. It also grants the user a healing factor, shapeshift abilities, and through them also the ability to fly via wings that he can create. Jackie, as the Darkness, can also create dark tendrils, which he can turn into weapons and can summon entities known as Darklings. While more of an anti-hero due to his brutal methods, Jackie Estacado is still a hero in the sense that he generally fights on the side of good. The Darkness hails from Top Cow Productions, which, like Skybound, is an imprint of Image Comics, as you may already know because we just talked about Witchblade, which is also from Top Cow, so yay. Number 1. Adam Eve. Obviously, one of my all-time favorite comic book superheroes that you should never underestimate is Samantha Eve Wilkins, aka Adam Eve. Or perhaps Atomic Eve if you prefer. I'm not sure where that started, but I feel like I see people calling Adam Eve Atomic Eve everywhere on the internet and honestly also in person, so let me know if you know where that's from, because I have yet to find the source of that. I wasn't aware of it, but people keep saying it, other than perhaps it just has to do with the fact that Eve's powers allow her to rearrange and completely understand the molecular structure of things. That's right, Adam Eve isn't just a matter manipulating powerhouse, although she is that, but she also understands the science of what she is doing, being gifted in science naturally from a young age as part of her power sets. Just another reason you wouldn't want to mess with her, because she can really understand the best ways to atomically mess a person up. Not a person you want to upset. That's all I'm gonna say. Adam Eve going off. Go watch the Adam Eve special if you haven't done that yet. Treat yourself. Number 10. Stepford Cuckoos. The Stepford Cuckoos, also known as the 5-in-1 and later as the 4-in-1, are the students and clones of Emma Frost. They are also often referred to as kind of being like her children because, well, I mean, they were kind of made from like her stolen eggs, so in a way, they kind of are. At least from a genetic standpoint. Emma herself has taught them, and while you might argue that you need all 5 of them to kind of equal one Emma Frost, we've also seen them accomplish some pretty impressive things even when on their own. I'd also argue the fact that there are multiple of them is actually kind of more of a pro than a con, even if it means they need to combine their powers to be at their most powerful. I mean, them being 5 separate individuals means that they can actually be in more places at once than Emma physically can. And the really cool thing is they all basically share like kind of a hive mind, so no matter where they are, they can remain in constant communication at all times, and can always be in sync with one another, through somewhat sharing kind of a psyche as well. The 5 Stepford Cuckoos were recently all returned back to life thanks to the resurrection protocols of Krakoa, and include Esme, Phoebe, Sophie, Celeste, and of course Irma.
Number 9. Dupe. Is he a sidekick or is he more of a mascot? I don't know, but originally, he was the original X-Force team's videographer. But when that team became X-Statix, he was clearly the most different member on the team, and that's probably because Dupe is one of the most capable green beans I have ever seen. According to Captain America, Dupe is the product of a Cold War US military experiment, and was instrumental in the fall of the Soviet Union. Somehow. But apparently, he also comes from a place called Marginalia, the world between worlds and a place that begins where the story ends. Whatever that means. Dupe is unable to learn English, and so he speaks in a language all of his own that everyone somehow can understand, but it's his powers that are just out of this world. He has possible omniscience, he's strong and durable enough to defeat Thor, he can heal from super serious wounds in seconds and resurrect himself, he has insane levels of speed, size alteration, energy projection, psionic bionic fire, blasts, and shields. He can perform dupish magic, his body contains a nightmare dimension known as Dupe Land, which he can access by turning himself inside out, and he has the power of the funk. Compared to the other members of the Ecstatics, Dupe is a powerhouse. Dupe later joined the X-Men, becoming the receptionist of the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, but while he was doing that, he was also tasked by Wolverine to take care of the threats that Wolverine could not handle because he was too busy. So, yeah.
Number 8. Donna Troy. Donna Troy was once known in the past as Wonder Girl, the sidekick of Wonder Woman, who also was kinda like her little kid sister. On our part 1, some drew attention in the comments to the fact that these sidekicks, during their time as sidekicks, were not more powerful than their superhero counterparts. And to clarify a little bit, these to me are simply folks who were at one point sidekicks, who we might at some point in their timeline consider more powerful than their superhero counterparts. So while Donna, I would say during her time as a sidekick, was really never more powerful than Diana, there was a time when she was actually profoundly more powerful. So that's why we're counting her on this list. So if you're like, there wasn't a time when Donna was a sidekick and she beat Wonder Woman, I think you're right on that. I'm not arguing that point. In a future where Donna Troy became the villain known as Troya though, Donna not only killed all of her fellow superpowered allies and friends, but even turned on her fellow Amazon, Diana, defeating and killing her as well. Sad. Sad! Don't worry though, Donna got to fight her evil self, so yay. Number 7. Iris West II. I won't deny that I'm more familiar with the version of Iris West II that we had in the New Earth continuity, but having to catch up on some of what Iris has been up to lately in the Prime Earth reality has been just as much of a delight for me. And I'm happy to say that we don't seem to have really nerfed her that much. In the New Earth continuity, Iris was believed to be one of the most gifted among the young speedsters we've come to know in the comics. This likely has to do with the fact that she is the daughter of Wally West and Linda Park. We would expect her to inherit Wally's speed, and considering that Wally is one of the fastest speedsters around, you'd think she would be capable of becoming one of the fastest ever. In the New Earth continuity, it was even implied that Iris did have the potential to become even faster than her dad. In the Prime Earth continuity, Iris West II has not been slowing down. In fact, recently she was shown to be able to even use her powers to travel to alternate dimensions, which is pretty impressive for one so young. And considering that, for most other Flashes, that is not necessarily even a power that is inherent to them, more something they really need to push hard for as grown adults when they really need to do so. So I think that's pretty impressive. Or alternatively, a lot of Flashes need devices to help them do that, so can't just do it by themselves normally. Number 6. Reverse Flash. Eobard Thawne is one of the most fearsome villains in the DC universe, especially when we're talking speedsters. Despite his super weird name, the threat he poses is very real. He is a time-traveling villain from the future who became a speedster and a villain, yet is known for being creepily one of Barry Allen's biggest fans, which is actually exactly why Eobard is so obsessed with Barry and ruining his life, completely fixated on the hero, the Flash. I would consider him to be insanely powerful because of how delicate yet cruel his manipulation of time is and can be. Not only that, but he can be weirdly petty and powerful is a deadly combination. Eobard also does not need the cosmic treadmill to traverse time, and has the finesse to travel back in time, alter the timeline, and then return to the time stream before the same timeline has time to basically split off, meaning that he can literally change history with his manipulation of time, as opposed to just creating another splintered alternate reality where things are different. Number 5. Barry Allen. Barry Allen is probably the most recognizable version of the Flash, considering that he's been the Flash for years in the comics, and his story inspired a live-action adaptation over at CW with their show The Flash, which follows Grant Gustin's portrayal of the character. A show that has almost entered the double digits in terms of how many seasons we've gotten of it, with the 9th being their final season. Barry Allen is often the hero who, against all odds, manages to come out on top and set things right, even if he maybe kinda was the person to maybe mess them up in the first place. Barry Allen might not be the fastest Flash out there, but he is probably the person who to this day has the best scientific understanding of the Speed Force, and it's often this that allows him to continuously adapt and evolve as time goes on. He also has been shown to be one of the only people to actually tap into and harness the entirety of the Speed Force all at once, which honestly, that's pretty impressive. Speed Force channeling all that's no small feat. Number 4. Black Flash. I mean, the Black Flash is in essence death itself, and while it is the death for speedsters alone, this still means it needs to be pretty fast in order to simply catch them. The Black Flash has successfully proven themselves faster than Barry Allen, but despite being death itself, doesn't take our top spot because there are speedsters who have actually managed to outrun even death. And there are others still who have fought to actually not just outrun, but defeat this dark speedster. Number 3. Wally West. Wally West is probably one of the coolest and fastest speedsters in existence. He also happens to be one of my personal favorites, so of course, I have to include him on the list and give him one of my top spots. When it comes to speed, Wally has beaten both Barry Allen, his uncle, and Superman, which is a pretty impressive feat considering that for the most part, Barry Allen is still the guy that people think of when they think of The Flash, one of the fastest superheroes in existence in the DC universe. Not only can Wally West outrun most when it comes to speed, but he can also often outdistance, considering his superhuman stamina. He has run for days on end without a break. When he remembered his children but no one else did following the reboot of The New 52, he basically ran himself ragged trying to find them, running for days and days and days on end. Using his super speed, he also has insane reflexes and quick thinking abilities, and of course thanks to physics, super strength as well. In fact, he's even proven to be stronger than other Flashes, like when he pretty easily bulldozed through a group of evil alternate Flashes from the dark multiverse. Made that look super easy. Number 2. Godspeed. Godspeed is definitely one of the most powerful speedsters out there for me. Why? Well, because he has the ability to actually take on the powers and speed of other speedsters, draining them of not just their speed, but also of their energy, their life energy as well. I would also argue that while Eobard Thawne was the clear and direct inspiration for the character of the same name in CW's The Flash, that a lot of the abilities that we actually saw Thawne demonstrate while operating under the guise of Harrison Wells were inspired, in fact, by Godspeed. Godspeed himself is a villain and enemy of Barry Allen, who actually was once his ally and partner as a detective, August Hart. He is well known for his creativity when it comes to utilizing his powers, managing to figure out how to use his powers early on to do seemingly impossible things, such as being in 2 places at once, creating Speed Force constructs, and even draining the power and life force energy from other speedsters. In theory, if Godspeed were to drain the speed from all of the others mentioned on this list, he would become the most powerful speedster pretty much ever. While he hasn't done this yet, obviously, I still feel this ability alone makes him one of the most powerful speedsters ever written. And I'm sure at this point you are wondering where the heck else we can go from here when it comes to topping this power level. Number 1. Zoom. Zoom, I would argue, is one of the fastest villains when it comes to speedsters that we've ever seen in the comics. And not only that, but he is also super smart as well, making him a deadly foe for either Barry Allen or even his nephew Wally West to come up against. Hunter Zolomon has even managed to beat both heroes together, in fact successfully manipulating them into breaking the Speed Force barrier, which is how he actually got his own super speed powers. Zolomon has also been shown to be as fast as one of the fastest there is, Wally West the Flash himself. Like Irie, he has also been shown to be capable of dimensional travel through use of the Speed Force. And now not only does Zolomon have the Speed Force, but he's also managed to access multiple forces, including the Sage Force, Strength Force, Forever Force, and the Still Force. The Still Force especially is pretty wild, considering it gives Zoom the power to just basically stop anything in motion, forcing it to be still. Pretty powerful if you happen to be often fighting against speedsters, like Zoom often is. With the Forever Force, he also gains complete control over time, allowing him to gaze through it to gain further insight, and he can also now just cause massive shockwaves by snapping, because time and comics, I guess. The good news is he came back to the side of the good and ended up sacrificing himself to set things right, so for now at least, we don't have to worry too much about all this power, but I imagine when he does come back, he's gonna be crazy OP. Number 10. Matter Eater Lad. Ah, the good old Matter Eater Lad. While definitely one of the most ridiculous powers, there are certain circumstances where Matter Eater Lad can come in super handy. He can eat anything, so if there is something blocking your way or you're trapped, Matter Eater Lad might actually be able to get you where you need to be or help you escape. And pre-Zero Hour Matter Eater Lad could actually also consume matter at an accelerated rate, both eating super fast and digesting super fast. So not only can he eat materials deemed indestructible because he can literally eat anything, but he can also eat an unlimited amount of matter thanks to his super fast digestive system. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you love superheroes that kind of have, are deemed useless and have fun, weird powers, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Bailey Hoskins. Bailey Hoskins is another hero who really is quite useless, but happens to have one extremely useful superpower, at least in the right circumstance. It was extremely useful the one time he was able to use it. Bailey Hoskins is a mutant who hails from another reality, appearing only in the comic X-Men Worst X-Man Ever. In case you were wondering, Bailey is the one who is, considered the worst X-Man ever. His power causes him to self-destruct, but because using it would kill him, it's really never expected that he'll use it. Ergo, the most useless X-Man ever. However, that being said, because no one expects him to ever use it, Riches ends up being easily defeated by Bailey when he does decide to use his powers on him to end Rich's fascist reign. Bailey, of course, has to sacrifice himself to do this, but seeing this as probably his best shot at making his life meaningful and actually getting to be a hero for once, Bailey decides to take it. And while he doesn't live to tell the tale, he does successfully save the day. Number 8. Rainbow Girl. Rainbow Girl is another hero who gets a lot of flack when it comes to her powers. And honestly, I get it. Rainbow Girl is kind of the worst, especially if we're talking about the weird sexism that's implied in her power set and in her character. Rainbow Girl basically can manipulate the emotions of others, with various colors representing different emotions, kinda like the various lanterns. And in fact, that might not even be all she can do. She can basically just harness the awesome power of emotions, whatever that means. Instead of harnessing the power of an emotion to create light-based energy constructs, Rainbow Girl can instead kinda use her power to channel that emotion. While in her first appearance in Adventure Comics issue 309, we see her get rejected from the 30th century based Legion of Superheroes, her powers have been shown to be useful at times. She can actually manipulate the emotions of others apparently, and at one point is apparently able to use them to make everyone desire her. However, we need to acknowledge that while useful, this power set comes with one very big drawback, which is also where a lot of the sexism comes in, to be honest: mood swings. Rainbow Girl as such has never really carried forward in the comics because her very existence seems to imply that girls are both emotional and therefore often irrational. Yikes. That being said, I feel like the idea of utilizing the power of the emotional spectrum is super cool. That's also kind of why we have, lanterns. If it weren't for the execution here, this could be a cool character. Take away some of the weird implications created by her character and her power set, and seeing someone like Rainbow Girl team up with various lanterns while not really belonging to any corps herself, it could be a cool time. If she was just, not the way she was. We need to fix some things, but I do think the idea of emotions as power is really cool.
Number 7. Miles Morales. A lot of people on the first part of this list suggested Miles Morales, and for me, it feels a little insulting to call him a sidekick. Miles Morales just is Spider-Man. The second one, sure, but he is kind of his own hero. That's how I've always seen him, at least. But if he is actually considered a sidekick, then he's absolutely more powerful than his main hero. Sorry. Miles has essentially all the same abilities as Spider-Man himself, but then he has some that are wholly his own, and they're actually really useful. His signature difference, in my eyes, is his venom. This is like a form of bioelectricity that he can emit from his body and use in some really cool ways. He can do punches and beams and blasts, and he can even infuse it into his webbing. But Miles is also able to use spider camouflage to make his whole body and even his clothes and costume go invisible. While technically the second Spider-Man from the Ultimate Universe, following the original's passing, he eventually trained and worked with not only 616 Spider-Man, but in a weird twist of fate, the original Spider-Man from that universe as well. And then when he came into the 616 Earth universe, he has pretty much been his own hero on the Avengers and other teams, while occasionally, sometimes, once in a while, working with Peter Parker. He's his own person, okay? He's not a sidekick, but we're gonna use him anyways, because this is what you wanted.
Number 6. Wasp. Janet Van Dyne's the Wasp is not necessarily someone I also would consider as a one-for-one sidekick per se to Hank Pym's Ant-Man. So, well, I as well am going to count her for this list because, well, I love her, and I do think that in the end she has proven herself to be a more powerful and definitely more long-lasting hero than Hank. I do think it's important to clarify that, to me, she's always been more of a partner to Ant-Man than I would say a sidekick. However, Ant-Man back in the day was definitely more the star between the two, so I suppose one could consider her to be more of a support character. In truth, Marvel doesn't really have typical sidekick roles anymore, unless you go way back in their history than they did. Now, this is likely because Stan Lee himself actually actively disliked the idea of sidekicks, so they pretty much ended up being kind of like phased out. However, I do try to balance many of my lists between the big two being Marvel and DC, the big two comic book publishers, with a sprinkling in of some indie properties every now and then. And for that reason, I include folks like the Wasp and, some of the X-Men who were once younger members teamed up with older heroes, which I touched on a lot more of them on the part 1. For Jan's part, I would like to argue that she simply proved herself more as an Avenger, even going on to be appointed as team leader for the Avengers for a time, and I would say doing a bang-up job of being a team leader, something Hank never accomplished in his day. So there you go.
Number 5. Hit Girl. We don't really talk about Kick-Ass so much, and that makes sense when talking about powerful heroes because there isn't really anyone from the Kick-Ass comic who is really superpowered. But in terms of sheer capability, Mindy McCready, aka Hit Girl and the sidekick of the hero Big Daddy, is probably the most capable character in the whole thing. Mindy can take out hordes of armed mob henchmen in seconds with her double-bladed polearm, and she does, tearing through enemies with such finesse that she makes it look like a dance. Her unusually refined skills are all thanks to the pretty ruthless training she undergoes at the hands of her father, Big Daddy. Although it's not revealed till later, Big Daddy was a cop who essentially went rogue and tricked Mindy into training her whole childhood to become Hit Girl and fighting crime with a bogus story that her mother had been taken out by a particular mafia boss. Using this made-up backstory as motivation, the two trained in all forms of lethal weaponry and martial arts to become strong enough to take on their target. Although Big Daddy himself isn't a pushover, he does not have the same kind of fighting skill as Mindy. Being able to take out groups of armed grown men in melee combat is a testament to just how strong she is, and she isn't even an adult, so just imagine what she could eventually achieve. Potentially, maybe.
Number 4. Nightwing. I left Nightwing off my part 1 because I was honestly worried about people coming for me for putting him on the list, basically saying he's better than Batman. But, after discussing with Adam and after discussing also with Andrew, I feel like honestly we all at Top 10 Nerd agree that Dick Grayson has gotten to a place where we could see him superseding Batman as the greatest dark detective there is. Something that I feel like Dick has that Batman doesn't, or at least doesn't necessarily in the same way, is a close connection to those who he cares about most. In other words, Dick basically has more friends. He's more popular. Not to say that Batman, doesn't have friends and he doesn't have people that he can rely on, but for Dick, these people are more like a family to him than just close confidants and colleagues. Dick lets people in and is ultimately a more vulnerable character in comparison to Bruce Wayne's Batman. And I think there is a real strength in that vulnerability for him as a hero. He's also proven himself to be a worthy heir to the Batman mantle, actually taking it up himself after Batman was thought to be dead. But at the same time, his real power comes from not needing to wear and use that mantle to be a great hero. In fact, I would say that Dick has done better under his Nightwing mantle than he ever did as Batman, and probably would have done better when he was filling in for Batman to just wear that mantle when standing in. However, Grayson was also aware that at the time, Gotham needed Batman and not Nightwing, and so literally basically walked around kind of trying to do his best like Bruce impersonation, which, let's be honest, Dick Grayson doesn't need to do to be great, and also he is not Bruce. Honestly, I think Bruce did such a great job of raising his son to be a better hero in his own right, making Nightwing an even better hero than Batman ultimately could ever be. Now you can come for me in the comments if you want, that's fine.
Number 3. Cassandra Cain. After just talking about Nightwing, now we're gonna talk about another member of the Bat family. There have been many members of the Bat family, all with different strengths and weaknesses, and they all have the potential to potentially be better, potentially, than their mentor, potentially Batman. It's kind of the whole reason for having them, to create better versions of himself. But Cassandra Cain, she redefined the whole role of Batgirl. She's easily the toughest Batgirl and arguably the most skilled member of the Bat family, mainly because of her skill with hand-to-hand combat. Thanks to her highly unique fighting style, coupled with all of her training at the hands of her parents and everyone else, she could easily defeat her predecessor, Barbara Gordon, but even Batman would be given a run for his money in a straight-up fistfight. Cassandra has beaten her mother, Lady Shiva, and her father, David Cain, and they are two of the best fighters in DC's landscape. She was brought into the world and trained by the League of Assassins to be the one who is all and the ultimate bodyguard for Ra's al Ghul. She received even more training from Bronze Tiger, Merlin the Archer, Batman himself, Lady Shiva, Oracle, and Black Canary. She has near meta-human levels of speed, immense resistance resistance to pain, and she can read people's body language, which allows her to mimic anyone's fighting style and predict their next moves. I'd say she's better. I don't know, you decide.
Number 2, Toro. Toro was the Human Torch Jim Hammond's sidekick way back when. And when Toro was initially the sidekick of the Human Torch, it was believed he had powers very similar to the Human Torch. He had flame powers that he was born with, being the son of Fred Raymond, who actually once worked for the man who created the Human Torch. Because, you know, we're talking about the android Human Torch here. Professor Phineas T. Horton. While initially Toro's parents believed their son, Thomas Toro Raymond, was a mutant due to his fire immunity powers, it would actually later be revealed that Toro was actually an Inhuman, with a latent Inhuman gene activating his abilities. Well, he underwent Terrigenesis, but anyways. Later on, he'd even learn that his powers weren't even solely based on flame generation, immunity, and manipulation, but instead were based in the wheelhouse of basically chemical transformation, with him being able to create and manipulate both elemental and chemical reactions in both his body and the area immediately surrounding his body, which oddly makes him more versatile than the hero he played sidekick to initially, Hammond's Human Torch. He just didn't know at the time.
And finally, in at number 1, it's Kato. Look, the Green Hornet is no pushover. He is a skilled hand-to-hand fighter and has 2 special weapons he uses to incapacitate his criminals. One with knockout gas and the other with electricity. But Kato, his sidekick, he's just straight up better. He makes the Green Hornet look almost useless in comparison. Reading through Green Hornet Year 1, which I highly recommend, Kato is clearly the more skilled of the 2, with most of the fight panels being dedicated to his handiwork. He even trains Green Hornet to be a better fighter, and yet Kato remains the sidekick, which is kind of odd. Kato has spent his life training in martial arts. Kato also has a mastery of Bushido, the set of codes that governs the samurai way of life, and it's that way of life that led him to serve the Green Hornet. Although he is most often seen pummeling bad guys with his bare fists because he's just that skilled, he can also use traditional martial arts weapons like the bow staff and nunchaku. The thing with Kato is that in the live-action TV show, he was played by frickin' Bruce Lee. You can't really get much better than that. And when the show went across the ocean to Eastern audiences, it was literally renamed to The Kato Show. Green Hornet brings in the money and is apparently the brains of this partnership, but Kato is basically everything else.